Hey guys, Greg here with Lensprotogo, and today I have a very special guest, Caleb Wojick from the YouTube channel DIY Video Guy.
Hey everyone.
If you haven't seen his channel, definitely go and check it out. There's tons of really neat tips and tricks for working as a one-man band, as well as some great gear reviews. Caleb's here today to help me explain to you the difference between a camera that costs roughly $2,000, the GH5, and a $20,000 camera package, the RED Scarlet-W. When considering a camera, the first thing people usually talk about is resolution. Now, the big thing to know is resolution is only part of the equation to get good-looking footage. With more and more cameras being able to shoot 4K and even higher, like 5K on the Scarlet-W, it's important to understand there will still be a quality difference in the 4K, depending on other factors like the size of the sensor, bit depth, and data rates, or how much information is being recorded. Sensor size plays a big part in this because it will determine the depth of field and the crop factor that you have to account for with the lens. With the GH5 small micro 4/3 sensor, you get a 2x crop on any lens you put on it. So say you have a 35mm, that's actually equivalent to 70mm on a full frame sensor. The same lens on a RED in 5K and Super 35 sensor would be closer to a 56mm, and then of course on a full frame sensor like a 5D, it will be a 35mm. With more expensive cameras, they also have more processing power, which allows them to take in much more data that can be manipulated later in post. You also get less compressed codecs like ProRes, which are easier for your computer to handle, so you can work faster and spend less time waiting for your computer to catch up. And in most cases, these higher end cameras will have some form of RAW, which can give you a whole nother level of control in your editing software. But that can also be a problem if you don't have the hard drives of available space, or your computer isn't able to handle large file sizes.
Now, going back to resolutions and talking about frame rates, with higher end cameras, you're actually able to shoot faster frame rates typically and in better resolutions. So for example, on the GH5, you can shoot up to 180 frames per second in 1080p. But on a RED camera, if you're in 4K, you can do 120, and if you're in 1080p, you can do 240. Also, keep in mind with some cameras like a RED, you also window or crop in on the sensor when you shoot in a lower resolution. Another in-camera thing we want to talk about is the amount of available dynamic range you get with these two cameras. Again, this plays a big part in getting cinematic images because it allows you to keep the detail in the shadows and in the highlights. So instead of blowing out those highlights or the shadows going completely dark, you're going to get more information. This is where the more expensive cameras have a huge advantage, especially something like the RED with its HDR recording mode, which takes multiple images, one slightly over and one slightly underexposed, which allows you to combine them in post to give you up to 16 stops of dynamic range, which is pretty crazy. And on more professional and expensive cameras, you get a lot more tools to monitor your exposure, like false color.
Another thing to consider when looking at both these cameras is the audio options. Now, to get really good internal audio options, you have to look at the mid-range cameras like the C100. Usually on the low end and on the higher end, they aren't really made for capturing professional audio without needing adapters, third-party accessories, or just recording it separate and syncing it in post. Besides all of that internal stuff of codecs and frame rates and resolutions, what you get with more expensive cameras is the option to build it for what you want to use it for. So you pick up the brain and that has the sensor and processing you want, and then add the expander for power, whether that's the base IO or the jetpack for gimbals. Then you can add a handle, choose a monitor size, choose a mount for the lenses like Canon EF or PL instead of needing an adapter, and overall customize it for what works best for you. Where with the cheaper cameras, it only comes in one way. Yes, you can build it out and get a cage for it and add external monitors, but all of that is just a workaround instead of it being built for how you want to use it right out of the box.
Another consideration is the perception a bigger, more expensive camera can give you. If you're shooting a commercial for a client and charging $10,000 or $20,000, you don't really want to show up with a camera that looks like the one they just bought their significant other. When you charge a lot of money, you want to come off as being professional and look like you're worth what you're charging them. That doesn't mean that everything needs to be shot on a RED or a high-end camera though. There are a lot of reasons where you might not want to shoot on such a big camera. You might be traveling lightweight or filming by yourself, or trying to stay under the radar with something like a GH5 where people don't pay attention to what you're filming. Instead of if you had a big RED camera all rigged out, you'd probably get a few people watching you. So for some projects, it's worth having a smaller camera with you to fly under the radar in certain situations.
Hopefully this gave you a little insight on the big differences between a prosumer level camera and a professional camera. Be sure to go check out the other video we made on Caleb's channel where we compare a $150 photo lens to a $5,000 cinema lens. And subscribe to his YouTube channel as well for more video gear reviews, editing tutorials, and more. The link will be in the description below. We'll see you guys in the next one.